In this special edition of Retracing History, we'll be guided by Superintendent of Fort Necessity National Battlefield Brian Reedy in the footsteps that George Washington took to attack the French on May 28, 1754. This skirmish would start the French and Indian War.
Up early, I did have a few folks that you're doing this at 7 a.m. Well, that's when the battle happened. I can't help that for history. Actually, we should have been here an hour earlier. Soon we're on daylight savings time, so it occurred just a little after sunrise. But on behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to welcome you here to Jumonville Glen, which is part of the Fort Necessity unit of the National Park Service. My name is Brian Reedy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the site manager of Fort Necessity and also neighboring Friendship Hill. We're going to spend some time together today. I'd say give yourself at least an hour. We're going to be here. If you have questions, we'll hang around for that. We are going to be walking on some rocky terrain, as you notice, so please watch your step. Afterwards, make sure you do your tick check and all that fun stuff, because we are here in the woods. We will be walking briefly through the forest. I will share also a little bit of the recent archaeological work that we've done here. Now, if you start asking for specifics, I will go vague, because we have to protect the site. It's not that you folks are bad, but sometimes there are bad actors out there, and once they get information, they might take that and use it for things. We've had issues here in the past, so we don't want that to continue. I'm going to be doing a little bit of reading. The reading that I will do, a lot of it's going to be coming from George Washington, and I'm trying to use a lot of information that comes from his diary. I was often very suspicious of the diary because Washington himself didn't trust his diary. And what I mean by that, if you're familiar with the story, his diary got left behind at Fort Necessity. It was captured by the French and then translated into French, and the original written version that he had has disappeared. So when it was retranslated back into English, Washington says, "This does not seem right." Well, when you compare it to his letters to the governor and other people, there's some great similarities. So I don't think the French monkeyed around with it as much. And what's great about a diary is you tend to unleash a little bit more than is often found in the official documents that you're sending to a governor. So, but just to understand, I'm going to start off with an account which I think is the most honest account we have of this skirmish here that happened 269 years ago. And this comes from a gentleman named Monceau. He himself did not write anything, but he told people what he experienced here. And this is written in an account written by Charles Bowen, also known as JCB. He's a man who served as a French Marine here in North America. He was a Marine for about 10 years. He enlisted about 1753 and would serve until the surrender of Canada, and eventually would go back to France. So he writes this in his account. This man was 6 days in reaching Fort Duquesne because he had been taken a very roundabout way. This did not prevent him from running into a band of savage Iroquois, pardon the language, who questioned him. He told them that he had left the French party, which included some Iroquois, and they had been sent to announce their coming. This sort of ruse succeeded very well, for they let him go, and when he was a short distance away, he took to his heels and arrived barefoot and starving. He brought word of the defeat of Jumonville's party, but could not give details of the accounts of the circumstances. He could tell them only that having gone some distance from the camp for his own duties, he heard movements which brought him to a halt. A moment later, he heard rifle shots close upon them, and a second volley and the cries of dying men. He suspected his party had been surprised and defeated by the enemy. This made him decide to escape and carry the news. An honest man. But to give you that sense, I want you to kind of use your imagination, and I want you to be Monceau for a moment. Now, what his duties were? Was he out for personal reasons? I'm kind of thinking he might have been out on guard duty. That's what I'm thinking. And might have fallen asleep or was just too far away from camp to help. So let's see if we can kind of recreate that. slowly start making our way down. Again, please be careful on this path. Last year, years before when I've done the program, I've never come this way, but I guess some really exciting news based on the archaeology. Because one of the most important archaeological discoveries is right where we're at. So, I'd like to catch up on our accounts. So, by the 24th of May, Washington had received information from the half-king, Tennessee Harrison, who was a Seneca, although born at Catawba, and a gentleman named Davis, who was a trader. They said, "'Tis reported that the French army has set out against Mr. George Washington. I exhort you, my brethren, to guard against them, for they intend to fall upon the first English they meet. And they have been on the march for 2 days. The half-king and the other chiefs will join you within 5 days to hold council, though we know not the number we shall be. I shall say no more, but remember me by my brethren, the English." So Washington later writes too, at the same day at 2 o'clock we arrived at the Great Meadows, where we saw a trader who told us that he had come this morning from Mr. Gis, that's present-day Mount Braddock, and said that he had seen 2 Frenchmen the night before, and they knew that a strong detachment was out, and confirmed the account that he had received from the half-king. Therefore I placed my troops behind 2 natural entrenchments where our wagons had also entered. So if you've been to Fort Necessity, there's the Indian Run and Great Meadow Run. Those are the natural entrenchments that he's talking about. So that's the beginnings of Fort Necessity right there. The next day, he would write, Washington detached a party to go along the roads and other small parties to the woods to see if we could make any discovery. I gave the horsemen orders to examine the country well and endeavor to get some news of the French. So the horsemen are basically the wagoneers. The horses that are pulling the wagons, he threw guys on them and said, go out and patrol. So they're not finding anything. So that was the 25th. The 27th, again, this is coming from his diary, arrived Mr. Gist early in the morning, who told us that Mr. LaForce and 50 men whose tracks he had seen 5 miles off had been at his plantation the day before, towards noon, and would have killed a cow and broken everything in the house if 2 Indians he had left at the house had not persuaded them from their design. I immediately detached 65 men under the command of Captain Hogue and Lieutenant Mercer, Ensign Peroni, and 3 sergeants and 3 corporals with instructions. The French inquired at Mr. Gist what had become of the half-king. I did not fail to let our young Indians who were at the camp know that the French wanted to kill the half-king, and that they had desired that effect. It had the desired effect, They thereupon offered to accompany our people and go after the French. And if they found it true that he had been killed or even insulted by them, one of them would presently carry the news therefore to the Mingoes in order to incite their warriors to fall upon them. One of these young men was detached towards Mr. Gist, and if they should not find the half-king there, he was to send a message to the Delaware. About 8 o'clock at night, I received an express from the half-king, which informed me that he was coming to join us, and they had seen along the road the tracks of 2 men, which he followed till he brought them to a low, obscure place, which was, in his opinion, the whole party of the French had hidden there. That very moment, I set out with 40 men and ordered my ammunition to be put in place of safety under a strong guard to defend it, fearing it would be a stratagem of the French to attack our camp, and with the rest of my men set out in the heavy rain, and in a night as dark as pitch, along a path scarcely broad enough for 1 man. So part of the reason why I brought you along this, imagine walking this at night, getting an idea. Scarcely broad enough for 1 man. We were sometimes 15 or 20 minutes out of the path before we came to it again. It was so dark that we would often strike against one another. All night we continued our route, and on the 28th at sunrise we arrived at the Indian camp. It's the Half-King's Rocks. It's about a mile from here. After hearing counsel with Half-King, it was concluded that we should fall on them together. So we sent out 2 men to discover where they were, and as also our posture, and then the sort of ground they were thereabouts. After which we formed ourselves for an engagement, marching one after the other in Indian manner, and we advanced pretty near to where we thought they were. So, get to the rest of that here in a bit. But the reason why I bring you here is to me, the most important archaeological discovery is right behind it. It's hard to see now because the ground cover has kind of taken it over. The difference between metal detecting and metal detecting done professionally is the mapping. So we did LiDAR, which is basically the mapping of this with satellites and all that kind of fun stuff. So we could precisely show where items were found. And one of the anomalies that appeared is down in this drainage area, directly across, you can't really see it, it's a big circular pad. And the archaeologist asked me, what is that? I don't know. We went down to look at it. What it is, it's a collier's pit. Before the days of coal in the iron industry, the steel industry, what did they use for fuel? Trees. So they were cutting down trees, and these individuals would cut the trees up, stack them up, pile earth on them, and make charcoal. That's what a collier's pit is. So we're down there looking at it, and you're like going, what does that have to do with Jumonville Glen? Well, when you're standing down there, and we're not going to go down there, but give you an idea. If you read the account that comes from the Native Council that was held at Fort Cumberland in November that same year, it says the French got before us, and when they went off the road, they encamped and we tracked them. And we came up to that place and went to tell Washington where they were. So they and our party, traveling all night, coming close to the place where the French were encamped, we directed Colonel Washington with his men to go up the hill, straight towards the French where they were, not above 50 yards off, where they must have come in sight of the French camp below them. The Half-King with his warriors went to the left to intercept them and go that way. And Monkatutha and another young warrior, Cherokee Jack, went to the right and left Colonel Washington. This drainage ditch right here goes all the way down. This is the approach. Now think of all the times you've been to the program. What have we always talked about? They're up top. Right. This is where the French entered. And this is where the natives could bring Washington close enough. You got to remember, you got 33 individuals who are not professional soldiers, wearing leather-soled shoes. Fortunately, it's been raining. It's been lousy, lousy weather. So we can get them as close as possible. We stand there, and we're going to go up. What is this? There's the hill. You're going to make it as easy for Washington as possible. You go up this hill, and just on the other side of that, well, there's the rock. 50 yards. So, to me, that's the most important archaeological discovery. It has nothing to do with the battle, but it forced us to get down there and see this from a different perspective, looking at these accounts. So, this is the entry and exit out of here. And when we get down below, if you want to explore where this empties out, I'll tell you how to get to that. But it's definitely a clear path down. So let's retrace Washington's steps and go up over the hill. So let's pick up on Washington again, and we was talking about holding council with the natives, and again, this is out of his diary. So, we advanced pretty near them, as we thought, when they discovered us, upon which I ordered the company to fire. Mine was supported by that of Mr. Wagner, and my company and his received the whole fire of the French during the greatest part of the action, which lasted a quarter of an hour before the enemy was routed. We killed Monsieur Jumonville, the commander of that party, and also 9 others, and wounded one, and made 21 prisoners. Among them was Laforce, Monsieur Drouillon, 2 cadets. The Indians scalped the dead and took away the most part of their arms, after which we marched with the prisoners and the guards to the half-king's camp. A lot of detail there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Well, yes
why
and no.
the arms?
Yeah. Huh?
Arms.
Why the arms?
Arms, yes, yeah.
Not their physical arms. Okay.
No.
I was thinking, why in the hell would they take their arms off?
No, that's fine.
That's what I thought too, so don't feel bad.
Wasn't
So-
Stevens out here too? Wasn't Captain Stevens out here too?
Yes.
Where was he?
He would have been with Washington Strip. There's 33 guys.
Okay.
So,
I
yeah.
thought they'd separated.
Again, earlier interpretations make it seem like that.
Okay.
So I think the 33 kept together, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk down to the Glen and kind of continue the story. So any questions before we head down?
So you're just saying that they now believe they came in from this direction versus how we've always.
Me as a historian, looking at these accounts, and we'll read some more of them, and seeing the
That
topographical evidence
Yeah.
here, because we always say, they said a hill. They went up a hill. Well, if you walk straight
That's
in,
flat.
where's the hill?
Yeah.
This is the easiest access point into the Glen. I can't imagine the French coming down here. There's no trail here. There's no road. Are they going to leap off the rocks? No. They're going to follow that all the way down and around.
Got it.
Yeah, it's
So-
the path of least resistance.
It's a key phrase.
And
We'll
they
talk
probably would have left some tracks too, the French coming in.
Well, that's what they discovered. The road that Washington eventually would build, which was the Trader's Path, Nemacolin Trail, Gist Road, whatever you want to call it, is located out by the front gate. As you're leaving here, if you look to the right, you'll see vestiges, and this is also called Braddock's Road, and you'll see that. So they would have come in off of that trail and then followed the tracks down this ravine and then told, hey, okay, you stupid Virginians, right there, you can't miss it. And we'll talk about what the Half King was doing when we get down below. Anyone else? Is it making sense?
Yep.
It's as clear as the Monongahela, right?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
I have one book with me. Well, I want to sketch when we get down there.
So always remember that the traditional telling of this was that Washington's men came in this way and the natives were down here waiting below. So just put your mind as Half King and the natives, and you're dealing with 33 amateur soldiers with guns. The French are here. Some of those bullets are not going to hit Frenchmen. Where are they going to go? Yeah, they're going to be the backstop. So what we have is a classic L-shaped ambush. The natives are down below. He tells Washington, okay, go 50 yards, and then just over the edge, you'll find them camped here. And we know it had been raining. Several of the French accounts do talk about them building cabins, as they say, or lean-tos against the rock face. So again, imagine that moment. You're a Frenchman down here, unsuspectingly. All of a sudden, they appear. So again, coming from the native account, the council in 1754, when they came near the top of the hill, Colonel Washington begunned himself and fired, and then his people, which the French returned, 2 or 3 fires, as many pieces as could go off, being rainy weather, and then they ran off. One of Colonel Washington's people, being more forward than the rest, and before his company, was unluckily shot by his own man, and a wounded Frenchman in the cheek. So the French, having taken to their heels and running, happened to run the way of the Half King with his warriors, and 8 of them met their destiny with Indian tomahawks, upon which the remaining survivors turned short and ran the other way where Moncatutha was, and upon calling to them, they observed they were surrounded. So, first guy they see is GW. And I'm sure Washington, he said, now I saw the French run for their guns, but who probably fired the first shot?
Washington.
I'm thinking it's Washington.
And is it up there that he is, or right on top of these rocks?
It's up here.
Okay.
Okay. The direction that we came, the Collier's pit, is that way. So literally, right up there.
So it's all reversed from the past, is what you're saying. Instead of here.
During my interpretation, this is the way I'm seeing it. So literally, Washington's firing on them. The French, probably their guns are under those lean-tos. So what we're having going on here is fire between the two. We have the French trying to fire up. I can see them up against the rocks, loading, stepping back, trying to fire. Washington's men loading, firing over. What's also happening, as I'm sure Washington's men are starting to filter down this way. So somewhere in here is probably where that poor fellow went forward of his rest of his company and got shot.
Did he survive, or?
No, the one fatality on Washington's side is a friendly fire incident. So again, it's amateur out here, or amateur quarter out.
Get used to that, Washington.
Yeah. So we have that going on. The French realize they're in a bad way. Their guns aren't working too well. So they're going to take the path of what? Least resistance. And guess who's waiting for them? The half-king with the majority of the warriors.
So is there anyone over here on the left here?
Who?
I mean, if they hadn't taken the path of least resistance and ran this way, would they have gotten
Well,
away?
probably what's happening again is you have Washington starting to shift down
Okay.
this way.
Okay.
Also, who's up here? What are the two natives that came over this way? Moncatutha and
Moncatutha.
Cherokee Jack. They went to Washington's right. But anyway, think, how do you get into this glen? Down that way, and that's where the drainage is. So we're going to head down this way. And waiting for them at the bottom of that drainage is the half-king. So it's basically those guys are running the gauntlet. Now there's a few that get through there. We'll talk about that in some of the accounts. But the majority realize, whoa, this is not a good place to be, and they decide to come back up this way when they encounter Moncatutha. Now Moncatutha could have been up there, could have been, we don't know. He was somewhere on Washington's right. And by this point, Washington's men have probably filtered down through this area. I mean, you can get down that way. Probably a few of them fell on their cans as they're coming down that grassy slope there, and leaves and dirt and so forth. And they realized, okay, the game is up. So, was it a 15-minute skirmish? I don't know. Washington says it lasted 15 minutes. So now we're going to switch and talk a little bit, it's going to be about Washington again, but he's writing an account to his governor. The first letter he actually writes is very long. The first 10 paragraphs, he's basically complaining about his pay. And then he goes, by the way, we had this little skirmish. But the second letter is a little bit more revealing. It's written the same day. Since writing the other, I have stronger presumptions than indeed almost confirmation that they were sent as spies. So the first letter was kind of here's the vague details, but here's why. And were ordered to wait near us until truly informed of our intentions, situation, strength, etc., and were have acquainted their commander thereof, and laid lurking near with reinforcements before they served the summons, if at all. I do not doubt that they will endeavor to amuse your honor with many smooth stories, because these 21 prisoners are going to be sent to Williamsburg, as they did me, but were confused with all of them, and by circumstances too plain to be denied, almost made me ashamed of their assertions. I dare say your honor will treat them with the respect which is due to all unfortunate persons in their condition, but I hope give no ear to what they say, having the opportunity to display to their best advantage, having none but to contradict their reports. So he's saying, I'm sending it to you, but don't trust them. They tried to smooth me over. They're going to do the same thing to you. I have heard since that one of them had gotten away. Excuse me, I misread that. I have heard since that they went away to say that they called us not to fire. But that I know that to be false, for I was the first man that approached them. So again, that kind of confirms that native account. and the first whom they saw, and immediately upon they ran to their arms and fired briskly till they were defeated. This is where I got messed up. We have heard that another being killed by the Indians that made his escape from us. So we are certain that 33 were taken or killed. And I thought it expedient to acquaint your honor with that the above, as I fancy that they will be an assurance of asking for privileges due to an embassy. So again, he's saying, don't trust them. So he's talking about that there was one guy that escaped. But in the native account, this is kind of interesting. One of the French company, having been away, got through the bushes and went back to the French fort. But in his way was met by some of our Indians, and they found that he spoke English, and therefore persuaded him to return to his brethren. They thought he was one of the British soldiers who had gotten lost. But he refused several times, upon which they killed and scalped him, and brought the account thereof to the half-kin. Yeah. So they think, okay, a couple guys escaped, but you know, we got them. They're not going to go anywhere. So that's an interesting account. This one is the one I really like. This is actually to George Washington's younger brother, John Augustine. He refers to as Jack. And he writes to Jack, since my last, we have arrived at this place where 3 days ago we had an engagement with the French between a party of theirs and ours. Most of our men were upon our detachments, so I had scarcely 40 men under my command, and about 10 to a dozen Indians. Nevertheless, we obtained a very sharp victory. The battle lasted about 10 to 15 minutes, sharp firing on both sides, when the French gave ground and ran, but to no great purpose. There were 12 killed, among them was Monsieur Jumonville, their commander, and taken 21 prisoners, with whom are Messieurs Laforce, Drouillon, together with 2 cadets. I have sent them with his honor to the governor of Winchester, conducted by Lieutenant West, because Governor Dinwiddie was supposed to be at Winchester to meet with the Indians, I should mention that, with Lieutenant West and a guard of 20 soldiers. We had but 1 man killed and 2 or 3 wounded, and a great many more within an inch of being shot. Among the wounded on our side was Lieutenant Wagner, but no danger will ensue. We expect every hour to be attacked by a superior force, but shall stay 1 day longer to prepare for them. We have already gotten entrenchments and are about a palisaded fort, which I hope to finish today. The Mingos have struck the French, and I hope will give a good blow before they are done, and expect 40 odd of them to be here tonight, which with our fort and on some reinforcements from Colonel Fry will enable us to exert noble courage and spirit. And then he has a postscript. This is the most famous part of it, the letter. I fortunately escaped without a wound, although on the right wing where I stood was exposed to receive all the enemy's fire, which was the part where the man was killed and the rest wounded. I can truly assure you I heard the bullets whistle, and believe me, there's something charming in the sound. Yeah, so a little bravado on his part. So he does mention, yeah, there's a man killed. He doesn't say how he's killed on his side. And, you know, he's pretty boastful about what's going on. I think that the boastfulness on his part even increases. In a letter to Governor Dinwiddie, he talks about how Moncatooth is sent by the half-king. This is a letter from June 3rd. He sends the half-king to Logstown with 4 French scalps to persuade the Wyandots and other groups of the 6 nations that the French have tricked them out of their lands. But the most telling part of the letter is, he says, there were 3 French deserters that we met a few days ago. One of them an Englishman from Loyal Hanning going to Virginia by one Crawford, a man of veracity, who assured by them that there were 2 master traders confined in irons at the fort when Monsieur Jumonville was detached. And at the same time, when they departed with this party of 50 sent down the Ohio to kill and take all the English they met. They also assured us that Jumonville's party were all chosen men fixed upon this enterprise. They likewise confirmed the report the prisoners gave, that 1,100 men were now in the fort and reinforcements expected. If the whole detachment of the French behave with no more resolution than this chosen party, do I flatter myself that we shall have no trouble driving the damn rascals to Montreal. Wait, yes, you know. Though I took 40 men in my command, when I marched out in the darkness of the night was so great that by wandering a little way from the main body, 7 were lost, but with 33 engaged. There were also 7 Indians with arms, 2 of which were boys, one named Dinwiddie, your honored godson, who behaved well in action. There were 5 or 6 other Indians who served to knock the poor unhappy wounded, in the head and bereave them of their scalps. So that we had but 40 men, which we had killed or taken 32 or 33 men, besides those who escaped, one we have certain account of. We have finished a small palisaded fort, in which with my small numbers I shall not fear the attack of 500 men. You know what? You win a little battle. You know, you think you can take on the world.
I guess.
Yeah. So,
In that fort.
yeah,
In that little thing upon the meadow.
yes. But anyway, as we know, George would not be, the boastfulness would be proven wrong about a month later. The 3rd of July, he would be defeated in that 8-hour battle at the Great Meadows. That detachment of French and native allies are being led by Captain Louis Colon de Villiers, who is the older brother of Ensign Jumonville, who's killed here. And there's, de Villiers writes about actually stopping here. And to me, this is the most poignant moment of the campaign, when they kind of veer off the path and they probably come over, look over these rocks, and in JCB's words, we left the next morning and marched on. Again, this is the morning of July 3rd. Now he says, about noon, we reached the place where Senor Jumonville had been killed. 4 corpses whose scalps had been taken were still there. They were buried and general prayers were said, after which Commander de Villiers addressed the savages upon the spot where his brother had been assassinated about the vengeance he hoped to have with their help. He promised to back them, and thereupon the march was continued. De Villiers was having a lot of trouble keeping his natives with him. He did not have locals with him. They had to bring their friends and family from Canada. And when I say by family, the Catholic Church had allowed Canadian men to marry Indian women. There were few Canadian women here. So we've all been under those family obligations, right? You think you have a free weekend? You think you have tomorrow off? That's when Uncle Joe calls you up and he knows you have your pickup truck and you help him move a refrigerator. So the same thing. And we know that there were several nations that assisted. There were the Huron of Lorette, who were Christianized Indians, as well as Huron. We also know there Odawa were here, as well as Nipissing. The Nipissing gave de Villiers some trouble when they were camped on the evening of the 2nd at Gist Plantation. The Nipissing said, well, no, we're not climbing up there. So he had to constantly persuade his natives to continue their march. Some would say, yeah, we'll go out on a scouting party, and then they never came back. So he's bleeding troops all through this march. This is not a well-oiled machine that's coming after Washington. I would have loved to have heard the speech he gave here. I mean, it probably rivaled Newt Rockney. You know, that's my brother, but it's your brother too. We're all family, and we're not going to let this go. So it was enough to keep that group together and get down there and do the march. So, now as far as the archaeological discovery, I know some of you are chomping at the bit, and those musket balls prove that this is the site. So for years, for 30 years, when I've worked here, I always had that caveat, if you've been on my programs, we believe this to be the site. So it's kind of that old joke, you know, how you know it's a battlefield because a historian told me so. Okay, you can replace it with other things. So yes, this has always been considered the site. Park Service acquired the site in 1978. Prior to that, it was run by the Sons of the American Revolution and a few local historical sites that helped to maintain it. Kind of fell into, I want to say disrepair, but was not cared for as well in the 1960s and 70s, and then thus the transfer to the National Park Service in 1978. And we made the improvements with the trails, the parking lots, and some of the interpretive signs that you see here. What we did discover here are ballistics, 18th century musket balls. Those musket balls are now being studied. Lead, prior to the American Civil War, we could actually look at it and discover, based on what's in the ingredients of lead, even though it's lead, depending on where it was mined, you know where it came from. Is it from French mine, English mine, German mine? Now, that doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to be from a French gun. You know, the Native Americans are getting their lead from whoever's going to give it to them, right? So what happens by the Civil War, there's so much trade going on, so much mixing of lead, that goes out the door. So the weight and caliber of the bullets found here are consistent with the archaeological finds at Fort Necessity. So they range from 62 caliber up to 66 caliber, which fits smoothbore weapons. So that's what have been used here. Again, I'm not going to tell you exactly where they were found, but they were found here in the Glen. I was going to bring along some artifacts, and I jokingly say artifacts. We pulled out garbage bags of junk out of here as well. So bags and bags of pull tabs, broken glass, cans. We know that the natives that were here were using bow and arrow because they traded with a guy named Fred Bear. That's a joke. Yeah, you got that. Yeah, they were from Michigan. So we actually found a bear broadhead here. We could actually trace where an individual was walking with his .45-70. We found cases of empty cases of bullets. So I could literally where a guy was walking and firing a .45-70. When we found 22 rounds, pistol rounds, all kinds of stuff down here. This was definitely the Wild West for about 20 years. We also found evidence of logging. So a crowbar, lipstick case. Not that the loggers were using lipstick, but I'm just trying to think of the things that we found. Some of those items I've kept. A lot of stuff was thrown away because it's junk. There's no reason to catalog it. But I am going to have a display of that. The other reason why we kept this quiet is we didn't want the site contaminated. And I know people want to come and watch and so forth. To me, watching archaeology is like watching golf, and any of your golfers, I don't mean to offend you. It's more fun to play it than watch it. So, but we did bring in cadaver dogs. So that's the newest thing now in archaeology. The jury is still out on that. It's just like metal detecting was 30 years ago to archaeologists, professional archaeologists. Is it a viable tool to use in the science?
So you
Well,
still
now it
haven't
is.
found the bodies here?
I will tell you this, that the dogs found hits. So, are we going to do any further work on it? As long as I'm site manager, I'm going to let the dead rest in peace.
Okay.
I am convinced that this is the site, and that's good enough for me, and we will protect it. So, I will open up for any questions you might have.
Did you,
Sorry, the young man in the back raised his
yes,
hand.
go ahead.
You mentioned Washington said he was on the right of his group apparently because Cherokee Jack and Monaco 2000 Airmen were on his right. But so that means if he was here, this cliff, then his line extended that direction.
Yeah, I think, again, if they're coming up, probably, it's actually nice and open. It's better shooting on that far edge than up here. So I think they came up here on an angle and then began working their way down this way.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
I'm just thinking if when they run down the Glen, they're running the gauntlet of the British fire also.
Yeah. So what you missed,
Giant rock in the way.
we came down the old, the return trail. And one of the important, to me, the most important archaeological find was the Collier's Pit from the 19th century. That's in that drainage ditch that goes down. That's the access point. That's the ingress and entrance into this into the Glen. Excuse me. And I think that's where the Half King got Washington to, and basically said, if you go up this hill 50 yards, you'll find the French below. The interpretation's always been this way, and I'm like, where's this hill? It's pretty obvious.
Well, once you're at the Collier's Pit, you can tell there's a hill.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to coming over the
We
top
do not.
that way.
Okay, let's make it as simple for Virginians as possible. You know what Virginians are like, right?
I don't know. I'm a Western Virginian. We're different. We're different from those
So,
Tidewater
folks,
people.
I'm just kidding because it's being recorded. So, but again, you got colonials. You got colonials out here. This is, this is a scary area. Okay, guys, just go up here. You'll find it right here, and that drainage ditch goes all the way down here, right below. And if you want to see again where I think the Half King and his men lined up, you just take this path down. You'll come to our boundary. And then the neighboring property is the Methodist camp, and they have hiking trails. So you're going to see the first trail to the left. You follow that, there's a little boardwalk, and you follow that up, you'll come to where the drainage ditch comes down. So the Half King came down, probably worked his way up this drainage ditch far enough, and said, Let's see what that dumb Virginian's going to do. Yeah. So whether the natives fired any of their muskets or they waited till the point where it became whack-a-mole coming down through this valley, yeah. That makes the most sense. I just can't imagine Half King, yeah, just come straight towards us. Yeah.
Thank you for watching this edition of Retracing History. I'd like to thank Brian Reedy for allowing me to record this presentation. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to Readout Productions.